Fort Worth Mayor Mattie Parker, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thank you. Good to see you, Jack.
Good to see you as always. And so I want to start by asking about, a big topic these days, which is data centers.
Right.
Fort Worth is considering this data center, I believe in the southwest part of the city by Black Mountain Energy. The Zoning Commission in Fort Worth just approved it, and Council, I think, is going to take it up in June. Where are you on this?
Well, I think maybe you might love this, deflect from your question, but it's really a statewide conversation right now. I mean, Black Mountain has their current project in Council District 8. We've also had the project most recently that pertained to Ville Ranch. Well, it wasn't a zoning case, it was maybe about tax incentives. But candidly, we think we all need the state to also step in, and you're starting to see their conversations. They just had a state affairs hearing last week that Chairman Ken King led. And I think that's healthy because this is a conversation not just for individual cities to have, but what does the future of economic development look like in the country, and how can Texas continue to be at the forefront? And we know data centers is going to be at the center of that. We understand it, but at the same time, you have to marry that with what is best for our residents. It's about environment. It's about, obviously, impact to your grid. It's water use. And then importantly, who is the end user at the end of this? The Black Mountain case is important because it has brought a lot of interest from people from all over our city. And the common word I hear, maybe people don't say it, but I feel, is maybe confusion and concern and just a lack of information about what a data center is and who are the right end users that we want in Texas that have the best technology, that really are paying attention to be really good stewards. And I don't think we're there yet. So, I'm allowing that process to continue. I have not met with staff after the Zoning Commission hearing, and so I'll wait for that to happen in June. But the other thing we have to figure out is this batch process that's happening with ERCOT and final approval at PUC. That timeline is critically important also for data centers, yes, in Fort Worth, but across the state, and that likely won't be complete until the end of this summer. So we may have some timelines that we have to really work on together to make sure we're giving the right decision for our residents.
I was just going to ask you about that because the legislature, while they're holding hearings, they
Yeah.
don't go, as you well know, they don't go back into session until January, unless Governor calls them back, which I don't see happening. And so, whatever the state decides to do is going to be after the fact that the city's going to have to make it, the council's going to have to make a decision. So you're undecided at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And importantly, because all that information hasn't come to us yet, right? You have to let it go through Zoning Commission. And then we, just like a layperson has been watching what's happening in Austin, other special considerations, we don't have all that information yet. And the good thing is our staff, city management team is really taking this seriously, understands this is an important issue for our residents and importantly for the council's consideration. And I have full trust that they're going to bring us the right recommendation. But they've already been charged by City Council to also come to us with an overall process that we think needs to be in place for consideration of data centers, and that likely comes to us in mid-May. So hopefully that will also be in Fort Worth and starting to be considered before we think about any individual data center project, whether it's the one in Council District 8 or beyond.
So this will be what, a set of regulations or a set of criteria?
It's probably more criteria. I mean, regulations is probably too strong a term in terms of what we actually can do in a city government, but also thinking about, are there policy considerations and powers we don't have that we're concerned about as a city government, and also working with other cities and counties across the state. We really want to work with our statewide partners to say, hey, there's some additional pieces here that we think the state government maybe should step in and assist us on.
But you're keeping an open mind.
Absolutely, and you should with any potential case. I mean, I can't think of an example, honestly, Jack, where I had my mind completely made up before it comes out of Zoning Commission, because everything can shift and change. And also really listening to constituents. And importantly, every single data center is the same as any particular zoning case or big economic development deal. You have to consider each one in isolation and individual attention, and that's what we tend to do in this office.
Well, I know some people aren't happy about it.
Sure, and that's understandable. And I think communication is so key. People deserve transparency and understanding. And it oftentimes is difficult because we haven't had an opportunity in this situation to really sit and listen to residents in a smaller setting outside of what you may see in a public comment session or maybe at a council chamber. So hopefully in the next month or so, as the council starts to consider what our policy considerations around data centers will be, also can bring in constituents to talk about particular projects that may be coming down the pipeline.
Oh, so you want to do that?
Yeah, I think it's necessary. And I understand why people would be concerned. And I don't, by the way, I don't think that our technology companies, our ultimate end users that are operating data centers have done themselves any favors about being really clear about what the technology looks like, why they're necessary, who they are, how they want to be great corporate partners in cities like Fort Worth, whether it's in Dallas, San Antonio, Austin. And that's a need too, and it's my understanding that statewide that's something that everybody has started to elevate, that their need to really step up and be different.
The industry needs
Absolutely.
to come forward, you're saying, and explain how it works, how much energy they use, whether it's energy, whether it's water, et cetera.
And all their technologies are different right now. So is there a top level industry standard that the state of Texas really should demand from any particular technology company or end user in the data center? That's an open question. I think that we should. I think Texas is now the 8th largest economy in the entire world. We deserve the best and we can demand the best. But we have to articulate those elements that are necessary to our residents and to the state of Texas, and we haven't done that yet. We've had great conversations with individual companies, and the good thing is we haven't had an issue in Fort Worth yet where I think that we've made a mistake, but we want to be careful because there's so much interest. And if you probably listened to some of that state affairs hearing last week, the demand has already gone up tremendously just in the last few months.
Yes.
So we're playing catch up, and you're right, the timing of the next session and any additional regulations or state law is off right now, unless they did go into special session. And I'm with you, I don't anticipate that happening, but who knows?
So let me ask you about this bond election that's
Sure.
coming up. Early voting starts on Monday the 20th, goes through the 28th, and then Saturday, May 2nd is election day. And I was adding up the 6 propositions that the city has, and if my math is correct, it's about $845 million.
You're great at math and at journalism. There you go.
That's the first time I've been told I've been great at math.
Okay.
But anyway, we'll go with that. So you've got streets and mobility, parks and rec, libraries, affordable housing, police and fire communications, and then the animal shelter. Why is this worth the cost? And does it come at a cost as far as are people going to pay higher property taxes because of the bond?
Well, first I have to compliment city staff, every department that really works on potential bond elections years in advance. Candidly, we started working on this bond election just as soon as the last bond election in 2022 passed.
Wow.
And I think we've put forward a really great opportunity for voters to consider propositions that are high priority for our residents. We've put, especially talk about our Transportation Public Works referendum, that first proposition, which is the bulk of the money, right at 60%, is important because we understand what high growth infrastructure needs look like in the city. But if I take a step back, the city of Fort Worth is incredibly careful with what we ask voters to consider. We're careful with our debt capacity in the way we let bonds over that 4 or 5 year period. And we will never touch your property tax rate because it's not a great way to fiscally manage a city. I can't speak for other municipalities or other counties or school districts. I can just tell you what the city of Fort Worth considers. And that $840 million bond election that our voters get to consider in May is something we feel very strongly we're putting the best options forward to voters. Importantly, as an elected official, I'm actually prohibited by state law with telling you, Jack, how you should vote in a bond election. But what I can assure you as the mayor, that our staff has done an excellent job. Our council carefully considered this over about a 1.5-year time period, making sure we felt like that our residents' concerns were voiced, and we made adjustments to that bond election propositions. That's why you saw the affordable housing of $10 million, trying to meet the need of what we're seeing across the country around affordability crisis and housing. But importantly, I think we're right where we need to be, and our voters ultimately get the final decision. And every proposition has elements in it that matter to individual people, but at a broad level, this is about quality of life, Jack. We're one of the fastest growing large cities in the entire country. All of the great momentum the city of Fort Worth has, you have to be careful with it. You have to really consider growth. And because of that, we put forward a bond election every 4 years that we think really meets the needs of the city. This is important to know, when city staff was asked to start compiling potential bond projects and provide those to the city manager for consideration as they started to divide out propositions, it was really over $2 billion of potential projects. That wouldn't be fiscally prudent. That wouldn't be how we would utilize our debt capacity responsibly. So we whittled that number down to that $840+ million, which is how you got those 6 propositions.
So this is coming at a time where the governor and the lieutenant governor are already talking about next session additional property tax relief. But at the same time, they really want to clamp down on spending by local governments, which they say have been one of the primary drivers of property tax increases. They're saying, look, we've reduced school property taxes, but your property taxes keep going up. Yes, because of property values going up, but the local governments are spending a lot. What do you say to that?
Well, I think Texas continues to be really the fastest growing state in the country, and 80% of your individuals that are moving to Texas are moving to Texas cities. But let me take a step back to when I listen to statewide leaders and our state legislative bodies, both the Senate and the House, I fully understand as a property taxpayer why this conversation is happening. And I know that there's a lot of pressure to reduce property taxes in the state of Texas. But it does take reminding that in Texas, we're a two-legged stool. You and I have talked about this before.
Yep.
We have sales taxes, and we have no income tax, and we have property taxes. And the city of Fort Worth, on average, is about one-third of the average tax bill in the city of Fort Worth. Do we need to pay careful attention to how we're spending money? Absolutely. And be excellent fiscal stewards. For instance, that's why you have currently a hiring freeze in the city of Fort Worth. We started to look at revenues and realizing to make it through this budget year and be really conscientious to make sure we are in the black, never in the red, right? And we don't go into a deficit. We are incredibly responsible. So when I think about advocating for the city of Fort Worth next session, we have a great story to tell. We are a model city in terms of how you manage municipal financing, how we put forward high quality of life services, police and fire, public safety services, transportation, libraries, parks, all the things that really matter to our residents are at a foundational level. That's what we are funding with property taxes. Now, when it comes to both Governor Abbott's current property tax relief plan, what the Senate had already passed last session, their advocates, the House will have different versions. There's a lot of politics that are going to happen between now and then.
No doubt.
And I have found the best way I can serve as mayor of this city is tell the Fort Worth story and attempt to help be a partner as we think about policy changes at a statewide level. You know, I think the governor's interested in buying down totally that M&O property tax rate for local school districts and having the state foot the bill, which in Fort Worth, that would cut the average homeowner's bill completely in half if they didn't pay local school taxes. Now, how does the state pay for that? I think that's the argument the statewide leaders are having to make. I understand the issue, and I have a lot of empathy for taxpayers right now, especially in an uncertain economy when inflation is high and gas prices are high and all these things happen. Everybody thinks about their property tax bill, but it's really important we remind people what services they demand, what they deserve, and what they're getting for the amount of money that they send the city of Fort Worth in their property tax bill every single year.
You brought up the hiring freeze. Why was it necessary?
It's just a smart decision by our city management team, right? Is to take a pause, don't make additional employment decisions before we understand where we're going to be at the end of this fiscal year as we move to the next fiscal year, right? Because the last thing you want to do, though, is to have to let people go because you didn't have the budget to pay for them, right? And it still allows flexibility with our city manager to kind of settle things down, see where revenue changes may be. You know, we'll get better tax roll in July from our budget office. But I think Jay Chapa and the team really were prudent in making that decision and making sure the city of Fort Worth is living within its means.
And I mean, is this a result of lower revenues, you know, sales tax revenues not coming in as expected, expenses maybe coming in a little more than expected?
Yes, it's a combination. It's the same thing that's hitting individual homeowners and individual household bills, right? Prices are high, inflation, cost of materials, labor, all those things are happening. The same thing is true here in the city of Fort Worth. So, you know, we're still very optimistic as we lead into the next fiscal year. And I think importantly for your viewers as well, the city has really moved to a much more transparent, earlier budget process. We'll actually start budget hearings in the next month and start to visit with city management and department heads about where we think the next fiscal year will go. And we'll use those revenue projections at the same time to inform what we think the next fiscal year will look like.
Are you expecting any cuts to services or perhaps
Not
jobs?
right now, no. That is our intention, is to keep services where they are because that's what our residents really deserve. And then, of course, though, just like last year, the management team, directed by the council, started to think about what a 3% cut across departments would look like. We prepare for the worst and then back off of that same aspect, and you'll see the same process in this next year.
And are you anticipating it having to raise the property tax rate? at all?
Absolutely not, no.
Would you like to lower it?
Of course we would, and we have for the last 10 plus years running,
Is
right,
that
is
gonna be
rolling that property
possible?
rate. I don't know, because I think revenues will really depend on that and where things are. Where's our commercial tax base versus residential? All of these things factor in. We also have the World Cup this summer, which is going to be a boost for sales taxes and hot taxes. We just don't know where all that lays. So I don't think we can make that decision yet. But and of course, it's always a priority by the council to lower that property tax rate to the extent possible. And Jay and his team have that charge, and I think they'll put forward some recommendations for council we can consider.
Well, as you know, I think since the last time you and I talked, Fort Worth surpassed Austin, so Fort Worth is now the 4th largest city.
And then they passed us again. I don't know where we are today.
So they passed.
We're competing for 4th and 5th in Texas right now.
Okay.
Yeah, 10th and 11th largest cities now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But you've had a lot of success luring companies here,
Yeah.
right? I was reading you had Ariat International, regional headquarters here. Obviously, the Taylor Sheridan Studios, Embraers, Aircraft Maintenance. Wistron, which has 2 super AI computing facilities, and then the Siemens Manufacturing Hub. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I mean, there's more. I mean, today they actually had a huge celebration for Drink Pack that's opening a great facility here. I mean, I think the good news story is economic development is thriving in the city of Fort Worth. And I'm incredibly thankful for the leadership of Robert Allen and our awesome board at Fourth Economic Development Partnership, a private sector really engine for economic attraction to our city that's been incredibly successful. Billions of dollars, 7,000 plus jobs attracted here. Many of those deals you mentioned. I don't know if you listed off Bell as a great example. The first jetty contract approved in the state of Texas. That's why Governor Abbott came to celebrate with us. But we're being really intentional, Jack. We want to attract companies that will have a long legacy of support, that understand Fort Worth, understand our workforce needs, and want to be supportive of our culture here. And as a result, we're getting great opportunities, and we need to support our jobs here locally, and also thinking about marrying workforce and talent and education all in the same place. And I've been really lucky to be a part of those conversations as well through our Mayor's Education Workforce Roundtable and our committee there to say, it's one thing to attract those jobs, but we want to make sure our students and our residents actually are eligible for those positions. And that is also something I think that Fort Worth has offered that a lot of their communities really struggle with. So I'm incredibly bullish on our local economy, and we're having some fun with it too. You mentioned SGS Studios, which is the largest studio in Texas right now, that partnership between Taylor Sheridan, 101 Studios, and of course Hillwood and the Ross Perot team. And you're starting to see that really be now an economic pillar, just like you would see with logistics and manufacturing. Film and television production has been something that Fort Worth can now hang its hat on.
I do want to ask you about workforce, but I really have to ask you first about Fort Worth ISD and the new leadership team in place. And I know there's been some sentiment by residents here not happy that the state took over, put in a new leadership team. Do you think ultimately was the right thing to do?
Well, the reality is something had to give, and students matter in Fort Worth. We need Worth ISD to be incredibly successful. It is now currently home to over 70,000 students in our city. It's our largest school district out of 12 in the city of Fort Worth. Do I think we're on the right path right now? Absolutely. We have an excellent board of managers in place that really reflect the greatness of our city, that are there for the right reasons, that just want to serve and help shepherd the school district moving forward. But it's very important to me, Jack, pointing fingers and blame does not do anyone any good. I'm incredibly thankful for the leadership that the school board up to this point shepherded. Dr. Karen Molinar was an awesome superintendent, and you saw huge gains by Karen while she was there. I think Dr. Pio Licata offers a new perspective and established gains in Florida, a superintendent that has proven what it looks like to create turnaround, and he is laser focused on doing that here in Fort Worth. And while I know there was so much concern leading up to the intervention announcements and the board of managers being placed, what I have anecdotally seen from community is maybe a breath of relief in some ways to say, okay, we know these folks are on the board of managers. They're in our communities. They are leaders here. And we still feel like we have local representation to help shepherd us through this time period. Because I'm confident at the end of this process, we can be the highest performing urban district in the state of Texas. And that's a huge gain because right now we are the lowest performing. And importantly, I've also seen a re-emphasis on the importance of our teachers and our educators and making sure they are paid what they deserve, they have the supports that they need, and they can focus in the classrooms. I think curriculum discussions continue to happen, leadership changes, hiring, all those things are happening. But our educators do deserve the support, and we also want Worth ISD to be a school district of choice. And cities like Fort Worth, our future depends on a thriving traditional public school. And Worth ISD is at the center of that.
How quickly do you think this superintendent can turn things around, especially at these failing schools? Obviously?
Yeah. Well, he's got a charge that feels urgent, right? And he knows that the time is of the essence and quick changes need to be made, especially as he pursues what kind of creating a new framework and changes that need to be in place for the next school year. And so I know that his team is really focused on finishing this school year strong, letting students had to finish their STAR testing, end of year testing, all the activities will happen at the end of the year. Hiring is a big push right now. You've got a lot of competition in DFW, right, for great school districts. And so all those things are happening right now so that he can put the right plan in place and start to create change.
I did want to go back on the workforce. I know you have a pretty big initiative taking place later this week with students. How important is that? Because especially with the high growth area that we are in, Fort Worth, but just the whole North Texas region and even the state, there are a lot of people, a lot of businesses coming in, and yet are there enough people to fill these jobs that they have?
Yeah, well, first of all, no company's going to come here if they don't think they've got the workforce. Those are the first questions they ask, right? I want to see the numbers, I want to see where they're coming from, and candidly, being a part of North Texas is an incredible advantage in the population size that's here, and people can come from all over to work, but we also want those jobs here in Tarrant County. Workforce should be a number one priority for growing cities like Fort Worth, and I think we are starting to change the model. I kind of touched on this a minute ago, but marrying the importance between K through 12 education, that pathway and bridge that exists to higher education. We want all students in Fort Worth to have the opportunity to attain a degree or credential while they're still in high school. Things have changed. High school diploma is no longer enough. Let's meet kids where they are while they're in high school. And you mentioned our celebration that's happening on Thursday. Over 600 students are graduating with a credential or degree simultaneous with their high school diploma. And those kids deserve celebrating. And the great thing is, Jack, they're ready for college, career, military. They have a ton of options in front of them. They can go work for an employer and they continue their education for free because they're going to pay for it. They can go right into the workforce, making a great living wage with a great career path. They can go on to a military academy or to a four-year institution. The sky is the limit, but we have to offer those opportunities to our students while they're in high school. And I'm incredibly thankful for our ISD partners. They've all risen to the occasion. Every single school district will be represented on Thursday. All of our higher education institutions, you've covered it lately, they're all fighting with each other for competition and for talent. It's fantastic for Fort Worth. So all of those university systems will be at the table also. And importantly, we also have employers that are now stepping up. Companies like Autobahn and Train that are wanting to integrate what their needs are in workforce into K through 12 classrooms so that they have an educated workforce coming out of our area ISD. So all these things are really, in my opinion, really showing why Fort Worth is leading the way, and that's a direct connection as to why our economic development numbers look so good right now.
And is this you pushing this?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate because I've worked in education policy and seen it for over 10 years before I became mayor here in Fort Worth. And getting to set the table. In the mayor's office, regardless of who's mayor, you have an incredible bully pulpit to bring people together. And there are a few particular levers that I'm incredibly passionate about because I think it's better for our community to be refocused and to set the table for success, and workforce and education was absolutely one of them. And so I've been incredibly proud by the council we put together. But no one does it by themselves. You know, I was very lucky to have Tom Harris, who was a former CEO of Alliance Airport, when he was trying to retire, said, hey, you know, why don't you bring all of your expertise over to help us start this council? Dr. Bill Coppola, who used to be a senior president at TCC, also came to the table. Dr. David Sines is now running the council. Philanthropy stepped up. So this is a great story to tell about what it looks like to create private-public partnership to help our students be successful. And I think you're starting to see the foundation be in place so that no matter what happens in the future, Fort Worth continue to be a leader.
Okay, last question.
Okay, last question.
Last question. I'm going to have fun with this.
Okay.
When are we going to see you make a cameo on Landman?
Ooh, I like this. I've been asked this question. I feel like if I can play my cards right with Taylor, why wouldn't I be a cameo as the mayor of Fort Worth, right? Now, the question is, what do they get themselves into that requires a visit to the mayor's office? I don't know. But I would love to. You know, we've had some great people in Fort Worth that have all taken the time to be cast members, and I think they've all loved being an extra. In fact, I talked to somebody recently who said, I got my SAG card in the mail and a little bit of check for making my appearance on Landman. So I would love to, for sure. But I'm incredibly thankful for both Taylor and Nick and their family and the entire 101 Studios team for their commitment and investment in Fort Worth. And because you asked about Landman, you know, what better marketing could you give our city and the beautiful views and landscape that you see in that particular production, and he's continuing to do that. The Madison's another great example. All the filming in Lioness. So I think we should all be thankful for what's happening here in Fort Worth, thanks to their team.
Fort Worth Mayor Mattie Parker, thank you so much.
Good to see you, Jack. Pleasure. Thanks.
Good to see you.